ping from the burner phone sliced through the late-night silence of my apartment. It was a distinct, jarring sound, one I'd programmed specifically for high-priority, encrypted alerts. Not the phone for take-out orders or casual chats. This was the phone that sang the siren song of someone else's life, about to implode. I set down my glass of Pinot Noir, the city lights glittering indifferently through my panoramic window. My name is Sienna, and I'm the person you call when your carefully constructed world is crumbling into a dumpster fire of scandal and bad press. I'm a fixer, a ghost, the architect of damage control for people who have too much to lose and even more to hide. My own life, by contrast, was a fortress of order, sleek, minimalist, every detail curated. My office, where I spent most of my waking hours, was a testament to this. A silent, high-tech command center overlooking the city, a place where chaos was analyzed, dissected, and ultimately neutralized. It was a far cry from the chaotic mess my parents, Morgan and Martina, had predicted for me a decade ago when I told them about my career choice. I remembered the scene vividly. We were in the stiff, formal living room of their oversized house, the one filled with antiques and suffocating expectations. I'd just graduated, top of my class, and had an offer from a boutique firm that specialized in delicate situations. Crisis management, Father had boomed, his face flushing a dangerous shade of purple. He'd slammed his fist on the mahogany coffee table, making the porcelain teacups rattle. Public relations for those sorts of people. Criminals, adulterers, frauds. It's about managing narratives, Father, I'd tried to explain, my voice calm despite the tremor in my hands. Helping people navigate difficult public situations. That's no place for a young lady, Sienna, he'd roared, his eyes bulging. It's unsuitable, unseemly. You'll ruin yourself and you'll embarrass this family. Mother, perched on the edge of a brocade armchair, had wrung her hands, her gaze darting nervously between us. Darling, please, she'd whispered, her voice thin as paper. Think of your reputation. Think of our reputation. Your brother Chase. Now, he's making us proud. He just got that internship at Sterling Thorne, investment banking, a truly prestigious path. He'll be a vice president by 30, you'll see. Her eyes, usually vacant, had held a flicker of something then. Disappointment, yes, but also a strange, almost competitive glint as she gestured vaguely towards some imaginary pedestal where Chase resided, polished and perfect. This is what I want to do, I'd said, my chin lifting. Then you are no daughter of mine, Father had declared, his voice like the crack of a whip. We will not support this sordid ambition. They'd cut me off that day, financially, emotionally, completely. All their resources, all their hopes, all their suffocating pride poured into their golden boy. Chase, the prodigy, the one destined for greatness, while I was relegated to the shadows, dealing with the very messes they so abhorred. The irony wasn't lost on me. My success, the discreet empire I'd built, cleaning up after the elite, was my silent daily rebuttal. I picked up the burner, its screen glowing ominously. Tegan, my business partner and the closest thing to family I had left, would already be asleep. She was the pragmatic grounding force to my often cynical strategic mind. We'd built our firm from nothing, fueled by ambition and a shared understanding that the world wasn't fair, but it could be managed for the right price. You handle the strategy, I'll handle the sanity checks, she joked when we first opened shop. She was probably right. Earlier that evening, scrolling through financial news feeds, a habit given the nature of our clientele, a minor headline had caught my eye. Unrest at Sterling Thorne. Whispers of internal review. Sterling Thorne. A big player. Chase's firm. I'd made a mental note. A tiny blip on the radar, nothing more. My clients were usually individuals, not entire corporations, though the lines often blurred, especially when a CEO's personal indiscretions threatened to tank stock prices. Now, the encrypted message began to decrypt on the burner's screen. It was from a source I'd cultivated carefully over years, someone deep within the financial regulatory bodies, someone who owed me a significant favour. Massive storm brewing, Tier 1 target, market manipulation, embezzlement on a grand scale. Think golden boy archetype, name about to hit the fan. This is going to be front page everywhere by morning. My breath hitched. This was big. The kind of big that made careers or ended them. The kind of big I specialised in. I leaned forward, my heart rate picking up its pace, the earlier calm shattered. Another line of text appeared, stark and brutal. Target Woods, Chase Woods, Sterling Thorne. The wineglass slipped from my other hand, shattering on the polished concrete floor, the red liquid spreading like a pool of blood. Chase, my brother, the golden boy. Not my name, his. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humour, and an even more twisted sense of timing. The fortress I'd built around myself suddenly felt very, very cold. The silence in my apartment was no longer peaceful. It was predatory. The red wine stain on my floor was still tacky when the world outside my window began to burn. By sunrise, Chase Woods, financial whiz or fraudster, screamed from every news app, every morning show ticker, every financial blog. My brother, plastered across screens looking smug and utterly oblivious in a dated photo from some charity gala. The allegations were breathtaking, a sophisticated market manipulation scheme, embezzlement running into the hundreds of millions, a network of shell corporations. Sterling Thorne's stock was in freefall. The golden boy had apparently been mining fool's gold. I watched it all unfold from my office, a steaming mug of black coffee in hand. Tegan had arrived early, her expression a mixture of shock and a kind of grim understanding. "Well," she said, gesturing to the bank of screens displaying the carnage, "that's one way to make a name for yourself." "He always did like the spotlight," I replied, my voice devoid of any discernible emotion. I clicked through articles, analyst reports, social media meltdowns, detached, clinical, like watching a particularly messy car crash in slow motion. There was a certain tidiness to it, a problem I hadn't created, a mess I wasn't obligated to clean. The calls started around mid-morning. My personal cell, the one they still had the number for, though I hadn't answered a call from them in years. I let the first one go to voicemail. Mother. Her voice, when I listened to the message later, was a choked, hesitant whisper. "Sienna, darling, it's your mother. There's something about Chase. Please, could you call me?" The darling was a nice touch, a decade too late. An hour later, Father tried. His number flashed on the screen, a name I hadn't bothered to delete, a relic of a past life. I let that one ring out too. He didn't leave a voicemail. Father wouldn't. Not at first. He'd expect me to see his missed call and immediately grovel for the chance to speak to him. Old habits die hard, even when your world is on fire. Tegan raised an eyebrow. "Going to pick up?" "Let them simmer," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "They're just realising the temperature of the water they're in." We spent the day in a strange bubble of normalcy within our own office, dealing with other clients, other fires, a politician's leaked emails, an actor's unfortunate public outburst. But the Chase scandal hummed in the background, a persistent, unavoidable thrum. My team, bless their discreet hearts, said nothing, though I caught a few curious glances. They knew my last name, of course. The connection wouldn't be hard to make. "Late afternoon," Father called again. This time I answered, putting it on speaker. Tegan leaned back in her chair, an unreadable expression on her face. "Sienna." His voice, usually so full of bluster and command, was tight, strained, like a rope pulled taut to its breaking point. "Father," I replied, my tone cool, professional, the same tone I used for a new client consultation. You've seen the news, I imagine." It's rather difficult to miss. A pause. I could hear his ragged breathing. It's about Chase. It's bad, Sienna. Very bad. So I gather. Another pause, longer this time. He was struggling. Good. We know you handle these sorts of delicate situations, he finally managed, the words sounding like they were physically painful for him to utter. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it almost made me laugh. My unsuitable career, my sordid ambition. Now it was their lifeline. I run a PR crisis management firm, yes, I confirmed, keeping my voice level. We need your help, he said, the words rushing out now. You have to help us. You have to help Chase. Help him how? I asked, as if genuinely curious. Make it go away. Use your connections, whatever it is you do. I let the silence stretch, imagining him on the other end, probably pacing, his face puce, his carefully constructed world imploding. Tegan was watching me, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. I'm very busy, Father, I said finally. My client list is quite demanding. Sienna, please. The command was gone, replaced by a raw, cracking panic. He could go to prison for years. The family name, our name, will be ruined, destroyed. We'll lose everything. Please, you're our only hope. The irony was a physical taste in my mouth, bitter and cold, but with an undercurrent of something that might have been satisfaction. Our name. The name they'd been so quick to tell me I was sullying. My unsuitable skills come at a price, I said softly. Anything. We'll pay anything, he blurted out. We can discuss it, I said. My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone, both of you. I could almost hear the desperate nod on the other end. Yes, yes, of course. We'll be there. Don't be late, I said, and hung up. Tegan let out a low whistle. Well, 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 how the mighty have fallen. I looked out the window at the city sprawling beneath me. They haven't fallen far enough yet. The next morning, precisely at 10, my assistant buzzed me. Mr. and Mrs. M are here to see you. I told her to use their first initials. No need for formalities they no longer deserved. Send them in, I said, my voice calm. I stood by the window looking out, not turning as the door to my office opened and closed. The silence stretched for a moment, thick with unspoken history and fresh desperation. Sienna? Mother's voice was hesitant, thin. I turned slowly. They stood just inside the doorway, looking small and out of place in my stark, modern office. Father, usually so imposing, seemed to have shrunk. His expensive suit hung a little loosely, his face was ashen, and the hand clutching his briefcase was visibly trembling. Mother looked like a frightened bird, her eyes wide and darting around the room, avoiding mine. They were ghosts of the imperious figures who had cast me out. The power dynamic had not just reversed, it had been completely upended. It was delicious. Please sit, I said, gesturing to the two minimalist chairs opposite my large glass desk. They moved stiffly, perching on the edge of the seats like supplicants before a queen. Thank you for seeing us, Father mumbled, his gaze fixed on the polished surface of my desk. You said it was urgent, I replied, taking my seat. I leaned back, steepling my fingers. So, tell me about Chase, beyond what the entire world already knows. Father cleared his throat. It's a nightmare, Sienna. They're accusing him of, well, you've seen the news, market manipulation, embezzlement. They're talking about federal charges, multiple counts. His lawyers? I asked. They're good, he said, a flicker of his old arrogance briefly surfacing. The best Sterling Thorne could provide, initially. But now, the firm is distancing itself. They've frozen his assets, our assets. They're saying he acted alone, that he was a rogue employee. And was he? I asked, my gaze steady. Mother flinched. Father looked down. He made some mistakes. Poor judgments. Poor judgments involving hundreds of millions of dollars and potentially defrauding countless investors, I clarified. He got in over his head, Mother burst out, her voice cracking. He's not a criminal, Sienna. He's just ambitious, maybe a little reckless. Reckless enough to use shell corporations, forge documents? I pressed, my tone sharpening. I'd already had Tegan do a preliminary scan of the public filings and early reports. The picture was damning. Father's head snapped up. How did you... It's my job to know things, Father. You said it yourself. I handle delicate situations. Details are important. I let that sink in. So he used shell corporations. Whose names were on them? What was the paper trail? They exchanged a panicked look. We don't know all the details, Father stammered. It's all so complicated. His lawyers are trying to untangle it. But you need me to make it go away, I said, quoting him from the previous day. How do you propose I do that if you don't even know the extent of the damage? We were hoping you could find out, Mother whispered, twisting the strap of her handbag. You have ways, people. My ways and my people are expensive, I stated flatly, and they don't work miracles on this scale without significant leverage or a willingness to get very, very dirty. We're talking about federal investigators, Sienna, the SEC, the Department of Justice. We'll pay whatever it costs, Father insisted, leaning forward. We just need this to stop. The shame, the scandal, it will destroy us. The family name, I murmured, echoing his words from the phone call. He nodded miserably. I watched them, these two people who had so easily excised me from their lives, now begging me to salvage the wreckage of their precious son's making. The son they'd lauded, the son whose prestigious path was now leading directly to a federal penitentiary. Mother suddenly started to weep, quiet, hiccuping sobs. We don't know what to do. We thought he'd learned his lesson after that other incident a few years ago. My head tilted. Other incident? I kept my voice carefully neutral. Father shot Mother a furious look. Martina, that's not relevant. Oh, I think it might be, I said, my eyes narrowing. What other incident, Mother? Mother looked from Father to me, her face crumpled. It was a misunderstanding with some client funds, a smaller amount. Chase, he rectified it. We helped him. It was all kept very quiet. You covered it up, I stated, not a question. Father sighed, defeated. He was young. He made a mistake. We didn't want it to ruin his career before it even started. So this isn't his first foray into recklessness with other people's money, I mused. And you knew he had this proclivity. They didn't answer. Their silence was an admission. They hadn't just enabled him. They were complicit in his belief that he could get away with anything. I stood up, signalling the end of the meeting. I'll need to assess the full scope of the current situation, and this other incident you so conveniently forgot to mention. I walked towards the door, then paused, my hand on the handle. And we'll need to understand what my intervention would be worth to you, in concrete terms. Their faces, already pale, seemed to drain of any remaining colour. The air in the room was thick with their fear and my burgeoning ice-cold satisfaction. The other incident. Those two words became my new obsession. It wasn't just about Chase's current colossal screw-up anymore. It was about a pattern my parents had actively, willingly concealed. They hadn't just enabled their golden boy. They'd been his silent partners in deceit. I want everything on this, I told Tegan back in the war room of our office, the details of my parents' pathetic plea still fresh, the other incident, dig deep, bank records, any hushed settlements, disgruntled former colleagues of Chase. I want to know who knew, who got paid off, and exactly how Morgan and Martina swept it under their Persian rug. Tegan, ever the pragmatist, nodded. Consider it done. This family of yours, Sienna, they're the gift that keeps on giving. us billable hours anyway. She gave me a wry smile, but her eyes were serious. You okay with this? Dredging all this up? I'm more than okay, I said, a cold resolve settling in my gut. I'm inspired. While Tegan and our team of forensic accountants and digital investigators started peeling back the layers of Chase's past financial misdeeds, I focused on a different angle. Mother had mentioned client funds. That meant there was a victim, someone whose money Chase had misunderstood. It took a few discreet inquiries through my network, leveraging old favours and calling in markers, but I found him, Andrew Kent. His name surfaced in connection with a small investment advisory firm that had quietly folded about 5 years prior, around the time Chase would have been cutting his teeth at a mid-level brokerage before his leap to Sterling Thorne. The timeline matched. I arranged a meeting, not in my office, somewhere neutral, anonymous, a quiet corner in a rarely frequented hotel bar. Andrew arrived looking wary, older than his mid-40s, with the tired eyes of a man who'd seen his ambitions crumble. I don't know why you'd want to talk to me, Miss... He paused, clearly not knowing my full name or my connection. I'd reached out through an intermediary. Let's just say I'm interested in certain historical transactions involving a young man named Chase, I said, signalling the bartender for 2 club sodas. Specifically, transactions that might have led to unfortunate outcomes for others. Andrew's jaw tightened. If this is about him, I have nothing to say. That chapter of my life is closed. And painful. I understand, I said softly. But what if I told you that helping me understand that chapter might bring a certain karmic rebalancing to the universe? He looked at me, suspicion warring with a flicker of something else. Bitterness, perhaps a longing for vindication. What's your stake in this? Let's just say Chase and his family are currently experiencing some significant public relations challenges, and I believe in thorough research. It took time. And another club soda. But eventually Andrew started talking. The story poured out of him, a torrent of resentment and regret. Chase, young and cocky even then, had been managing a small portfolio for Andrew's firm. He'd made unauthorized high-risk trades, chasing a big win. When it blew up, he'd tried to cover his tracks, falsifying records. Andrew's firm, liable for their employees' actions, had taken a massive hit. They'd tried to recover the funds, but Chase, backed by family money and aggressive lawyers, had wriggled out of significant personal responsibility. Andrew's firm had collapsed. His reputation was tarnished. His parents, Andrew said, his voice laced with venom, they swooped in like vultures in tailored suits, made it all about their precious boy's youthful indiscretion. They paid a settlement, a fraction of what was lost, gag orders all around, made sure his name was scrubbed clean. He walked away without a scratch, straight into another, better job. I lost everything. A fresh wave of disgust washed over me, colder and sharper this time. It wasn't just financial ruin. It was the casual cruelty of it, the entitlement, the unwavering belief that rules were for other people. And my parents, Morgan and Martina, were the architects of that belief. He was always like that, Andrew continued, warming to his subject now that the dam had broken. Arrogant, believed he was smarter than everyone else. Rules were suggestions. His parents treated him like a prince. Anything he wanted, he got. Any mess he made, they cleaned up. This current scandal, honestly, I'm surprised it took this long. The grim satisfaction I felt was undeniable. Every word Andrew spoke was another nail in their coffin. The current scandal, the one splashed across the headlines, wasn't an anomaly. It was the inevitable culmination of a lifetime of unchecked privilege and parental malfeasance. Did you keep any records? I asked. Anything from back then? Emails? Documents? Andrew hesitated. It was a long time ago. I tried to put it behind me. Sometimes, I said, leaning in. The past has a way of becoming very relevant to the present. He looked at me, a shrewd glint in his tired eyes. If I could help you, ensure that Chase and his parents finally face some real consequences, what would that be worth? Potentially, I said, a great deal. He nodded slowly. I might have a few things tucked away. Digital breadcrumbs Chase thought he'd swept clean. He wasn't as smart as he thought he was, even with computers. He paused, then added, there was also talk back then about how some of the rectified funds and other windfalls Chase seemed to acquire were funneled into some kind of family trust, controlled by his father, Morgan. I never got proof, but the rumours were strong. My blood ran cold. Not just covering up, not just enabling. Were they directly, knowingly benefiting from his crimes, even then? The scope of their rottenness was deeper and darker than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about Chase anymore. This was about all of them. Armed with Andrew's breadcrumbs and Tegan's team's relentless digging, the picture sharpened with horrifying clarity. The family trust Andrew mentioned wasn't just a rumour. It was a very real, very active entity, with Morgan as its primary trustee. And yes, there were transactions cleverly disguised but traceable by experts showing significant sums flowing into it, coinciding suspiciously with Chase's more successful periods, both past and present. I let them stew for another 48 hours before summoning Morgan and Martina back to my office. The wait, I knew, would be agonizing for them. Every news alert, every speculative article, every hushed conversation they overheard would be another turn of the screw. They looked worse this time. Father's attempt at a confident stride faltered as he crossed my threshold. Mother's eyes were puffy and red-rimmed, her carefully applied makeup failing to conceal the sleepless nights. Please, Father began as soon as they were seated, his voice hoarse. Have you found anything? Is there any way, I held up a hand, silencing him. I let the silence hang for a moment, enjoying the way they squirmed. Then I slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a simplified flowchart, stark in its implications, showing a series of numbered accounts and arrows leading directly to the Morgan Family Trust. Perhaps you can explain this, I said, my voice devoid of inflection. Father stared at it, his face turning a mottled grey. Mother leaned over his shoulder, her breath catching in a small gasp. This is an outrage, Father spluttered, attempting to rally. What are you implying? This is a legitimate family financial vehicle. Is it? I asked, because my team has found some rather generous contributions to this legitimate vehicle that align quite remarkably with periods where Chase was, shall we say, exceeding his declared income. Both recently and, interestingly enough, around the time of his little misunderstanding 5 years ago. Mother crumbled. Morgan, please, she whispered, her hand clutching his arm. Don't. We didn't ask too many questions, she admitted, her voice barely audible, her gaze fixed on the damning flowchart. Chase was always so generous. He said he was doing well, making smart investments. He wanted to contribute to our future, to the family. Generous with whose money, Mother? I asked, my voice soft but cutting. The investors he defrauded? Andrew Kent, whose life he ruined? Father's face contorted. That was settled. That was in the past. The past has a nasty habit of catching up, I said, especially when it establishes a pattern of behaviour, a pattern of familial complicity. Their hypocrisy was a physical thing in the room, thick and cloying. They hadn't just looked the other way. They'd held out their hands for their share of the spoils. I leaned forward. You should also know that Lexis Barnes is sniffing around. I mentioned the name of a particularly tenacious investigative journalist, known for her deep dives into financial crimes. She's very good, and she's starting to ask questions about family trusts and historical patterns of good fortune in families with suddenly disgraced sons. Funny that. Their eyes widened in fresh terror. Social ruin was one thing. Being implicated as direct beneficiaries of their sons' crimes was another level of catastrophe entirely. To even attempt to mitigate this disaster, I continued, my voice hardening, to try and shield you from the worst of the fallout, and let me be clear, Chase is going to prison, that's a certainty, would require manoeuvres of an extreme nature. It would involve leveraging every contact I have, calling in favours that would indebt me for years, and exposing myself and my firm to considerable professional and possibly legal risks. I let them absorb the weight of that. We'd be treading a very fine line between crisis management and something else entirely. A desperate, pathetic flicker of hope sparked in Father's eyes. But you could do it. You could help us. Perhaps, I conceded, there might be a way to construct a narrative, to position Chase as a cog in a larger machine, perhaps even a scapegoat for more senior figures at Sterling Thorn. It wouldn't absolve him, not by a long shot, but it might shave a few years off his sentence. It might allow you to retain some semblance of your personal assets, provided you cooperate fully and throw Chase under the bus in a very specific, very public way. I paused, then delivered the next blow. I've already had a hypothetical conversation with a contact at the SEC, outlined a potential scenario. If Chase were to offer full, unreserved cooperation, implicating others, providing verifiable evidence against bigger fish, there's a narrow path. It doesn't save him from prison, not even close. His reputation, your reputation, will still be mud. But it might prevent utter annihilation. It's not about saving Chase, you understand. It's about controlling the narrative of your ruin. They stared at me, speechless. The idea of sacrificing Chase, even partially to save themselves, was clearly a new and horrifying concept. This is, of course, all theoretical, I said smoothly. My full involvement, my willingness to even step into this cesspool you've created, comes at a price. I watched the hope in their eyes curdle into dread. A price you will pay, in full. I will be in touch with my terms. I stood up. The meeting is over. Don't contact me. I'll contact you. They stumbled out of my office looking like they'd aged another decade in the span of an hour. The scent of their fear lingered in the air, and it was, I had to admit, rather satisfying. The price of silence, the price of my intervention, was beginning to form in my mind, and it was going to be exquisite. The silence I imposed on them was, I imagined, a special kind of torture. For days they heard nothing from me. Their calls to my personal phone went unanswered. Texts, increasingly frantic, were ignored. Mother even had the audacity to show up at my apartment building, only to be politely but firmly turned away by the doorman, who was under strict instructions. I watched her on the security feed, a hunched, desperate figure retreating down the street. It was a far cry from the woman who had coolly informed me I was an embarrassment. I wasn't idle. Tegan and I huddled, strategizing, crafting the terms of my assistance. It wasn't just about money. Oh, there would be money, a significant amount, but this was about something more profound. This was about dismantling their world, brick by hypocritical brick. "Are you sure about this, Sienna?" Tegan asked, reviewing my initial draft of demands. Her eyebrows were practically at her hairline. "This isn't just scorched earth. This is salting the earth afterwards." "They salted my earth a long time ago," I replied, my voice flat. "This is just reciprocity." Lexis Barnes, the journalist I'd mentioned, suddenly dropped a bombshell. A meticulously researched, scathing article appeared in a major online publication, detailing not just Chase's current predicament, but also hinting strongly at a history of familial enablement and questionable financial dealings within the immediate family. It didn't name names beyond Chase, not directly, but the implications were clear. It even referenced an earlier hushed-up incident involving client funds. Andrew Kent, it seemed, had found an anonymous way to share some of his digital breadcrumbs. Or perhaps Lexis was just that good. I may have, inadvertently, confirmed a few publicly verifiable but not directly traceable details when a source close to the investigation had reached out to her. Just enough to point her in the right direction. The article went viral. My parents, already reeling, were now social pariahs. The whispers became shouts. The Hamptons' invitations dried up. The charity boards quietly requested their resignations. Their gilded cage was now a very public pillory. It was during this period, while they were marinating in their disgrace, that another piece of leverage fell into my lap, almost by accident. One of Tegan's investigators, a genius at navigating the dark corners of online forums where disgruntled employees vent, picked up on a whisper. A junior analyst at Sterling Thorne, someone named Ariel Simpson, was terrified. It seemed Chase, in his initial panic before the feds truly descended, had tried to pressure her. Coerce her, actually. He'd cornered her, demanding she delete certain files, shred certain documents. Obstruction of justice, a fresh, ugly charge to add to his growing list. Ariel, young and scared, hadn't complied, but she had proof. A panicked saved voicemail from Chase, a late-night email heavy with veiled threats. "This is gold, Sienna," Tegan said, laying the brief on my desk. "Pure, unadulterated gold. Ariel is terrified of Chase, terrified of Sterling Thorne, terrified of the feds. She's a scared kid who just wants this to go away. And we," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, "are going to help her, in a way that also helps us." I now held a delicate instrument. I could use Ariel's testimony to paint Chase as even more of a desperate, manipulative criminal, burying him completely. Or I could coach Ariel to frame her testimony in a way that highlighted his panic, his desperation, perhaps making him seem less like a calculating mastermind and more like a cornered rat. It wouldn't save him, but it might influence the sentencing, make him look slightly less odious than the truly big fish. The choice of how this information was deployed and to whose benefit was entirely mine. It was another arrow in my quiver, another weight on the scales I was so carefully balancing. Finally, when I judged them to be at their absolute breaking point, I made the call. I used Father's personal cell, knowing he'd snatch it up instantly. "Sienna?" His voice was a raw croak. "Father," I said, my tone brisk, all business. "I have formulated my terms for assisting you in mitigating the extensive damage your son has caused." A choked sound from his end. "Yes, anything. We'll do anything." "I'm glad to hear you're so amenable," I said. "There will be a meeting at the estate." The grand, sprawling house they'd always intended to leave solely to Chase, the symbol of their dynastic ambitions. "Tomorrow, noon, bring your lawyers. Bring Chase, if he's capable of coherent thought. And bring your checkbooks." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "And whatever dignity you have left, you're about to learn the true cost of raising a golden boy and disowning a daughter." I hung up before he could respond, the click of the receiver echoing in the sudden quiet of my office. Tegan looked at me, a mixture of awe and trepidation in her eyes. "Show time," she murmured. "Indeed," I replied, feeling a thrill cold and sharp run through me. The sword of Damocles I'd been holding over their heads was about to fall. The grand living room of the estate felt like a mausoleum. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight filtering through the heavy velvet curtains Mother had always kept partially drawn to protect the precious antiques. Today they just seemed to emphasize the gloom. Morgan, Martina, and a shockingly diminished Chase were assembled. Chase, out on bail, looked like a ghost. His usually impeccable suit was rumpled, his eyes were hollow, and he stared blankly ahead, a puppet whose strings had been cut. Their two lawyers, grim-faced and uncomfortable, flanked them like undertakers. I made my entrance flanked by Tegan and my own razor-sharp attorney, a woman renowned for her ability to dissect contracts and adversaries with equal precision. The air crackled with tension. I took a seat in Father's oversized armchair, the one he always held court from. Today he was perched on a delicate settee opposite me, looking like a dethroned king. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries we don't feel," I began, my voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "The situation is dire. Chase," I nodded curtly in his direction, "is going to prison. That is non-negotiable. The evidence against him is overwhelming, and as you may have heard, his attempts to obstruct justice by intimidating a junior analyst named Ariel Simpson have not gone unnoticed." A collective intake of breath from their side of the room. Chase's head jerked up, a flicker of fear finally animating his dead eyes. "Your family name," I continued, my gaze sweeping over Morgan and Martina, "is already synonymous with scandal. Your social standing is obliterated. Your finances are, or soon will be, in ruins." I let that hang in the air. However, I can perhaps prevent complete and utter destitution. I can perhaps ensure Chase doesn't receive the absolute maximum sentence allowed by law. If, and only if, you meet my terms, all of them, without alteration or negotiation. My lawyer placed a sheaf of documents on the polished mahogany coffee table between us. "Term number 1, I said, my voice clear and cold. "The apology. You will take out a full-page, signed public apology in 3 major national newspapers, the Times, the Journal, and the Post. The text of this apology will be dictated by me. It will detail your disownment of me 10 years ago, your blatant favoritism towards Chase, your profound misjudgment of my character and career choices, and it will explicitly acknowledge that my unsuitable skills are now your only hope. It must state unequivocally that you were wrong about everything." Morgan started to rise, his face purpling. "This is outrageous, humiliating." "Sit down, Father," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous softness. He sank back, deflated. "We're just getting started. Term number 2, the disinheritance. You will publicly and legally disown Chase. All financial support, present and future, is to be terminated immediately. He will face his sentence and its aftermath entirely alone. No trust fund bailouts, no quiet allowances, nothing." Martina let out a strangled sob, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. Chase stared at me, his expression unreadable, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Term number 3, the estate. This house, its contents, all associated properties currently under your names are to be signed over to me, effective immediately." I gestured around the opulent room. "I quite like the view." "Term number 4, the foundation." I leaned forward. "You will liquidate a significant portion of your remaining non-seized assets. The precise sum is detailed in these documents. These funds will be used to establish and endow the Sienna Woods Foundation for Unconventional Women. Its mission will be to provide grants and support to young women pursuing careers their families deem unsuitable or inappropriate. The initial endowment will be substantial and its source, your penance, will be publicly attributed." A low growl rumbled in Morgan's chest. Tegan shot him a look that could freeze fire. "And finally, term number 5, the confession." I turned my attention to Chase. "You will make a full confession to the authorities. However, this confession will be carefully framed. You will detail the immense pressure you were under from more senior partners at Sterling Thorne. You will name names, specific individuals who, you will claim, encouraged and directed your activities. Whether this is entirely true or not is immaterial. It muddies the waters. It offers you up as a partial scapegoat, a pawn in a larger game. It might make the prosecutors consider a slightly less draconian sentence in exchange for your cooperation in targeting bigger fish. My PR channels will assist in disseminating this narrative. This is my help for you, Chase. It ensures you burn every bridge with your old colleagues, making you a pariah among them, but it could save you a few years inside. It also leverages the Ariel Simpson situation. Your confession will frame your actions towards her as born of panic and desperation under duress, not calculated malice. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Morgan was shaking with rage. Martina was openly weeping. Chase just stared, his face a mask of utter defeat. Their lawyers looked like they wanted to be anywhere else on earth. My lawyer calmly pushed the documents further across the table. These are legally binding agreements, prepared for your immediate signature. My client's terms are, as she stated, non-negotiable. You have 1 hour to sign. If you refuse, I walk out that door, and any possibility of my intervention vanishes. Lexis Barnes gets an exclusive interview with Ariel Simpson, complete with recordings and emails, detailing Chase's threats and your family's long history of covering up his indiscretions. The SEC will be anonymously tipped off about the full extent of the family trust's questionable inflows. You will face the full, unmitigated storm, alone. The colour drained completely from Morgan's face. Martina's sobs became ragged gasps. Chase looked like he might physically collapse. The fight went out of them, replaced by a chilling, stark terror. Slowly, shakily, Morgan reached for the pen. His signature was a spidery scrawl. Martina followed, her hand guided by her lawyer, tears blurring her vision. Finally, Chase. He signed his name with a dead, mechanical motion. Their signatures were shaky, defeat etched on every line. The empire had crumbled. The price had been paid. The ink on those documents was barely dry before the world shifted. The public apologies ran exactly as I dictated, causing a media firestorm. Commentators dissected every word, marvelling at the unprecedented level of self-flagellation. The fall of the House of Woods became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and exclusive clubs. The family name, once a symbol of old money and prestige, was now irrevocably linked with scandal, hypocrisy, and a spectacular, self-inflicted comeuppance. Chase's cooperation, carefully stage-managed by my team and his new, less arrogant lawyers, did indeed muddy the waters. He implicated several senior figures at Sterling Thorne, some of whom were genuinely culpable, others less so. It created enough chaos and provided enough leverage for the prosecutors that his sentence, while substantial, wasn't the absolute worst-case scenario. He was still going away for a long time, stripped of his wealth, his reputation, and any semblance of a future in finance. He was, as per our agreement, utterly alone. No tearful family visits to the minimum security facility he eventually landed in. No hushed phone calls promising support. Nothing. The estate, my estate now, was silent when I first walked through it as its sole owner. The heavy, oppressive furniture was still there, the portraits of stern-faced ancestors still lining the halls. I had it all removed, systematically. The opulence that had once intimidated me now just felt empty. I stood in the vast, echoing living room where my fate had been sealed twice, once in rejection, once in triumph. There was no elation, no fist-pumping victory, just a profound, cold satisfaction. The revenge was complete, the transaction was finalised. The Sienna Woods Foundation for Unconventional Women launched, with a press conference that generated almost as much buzz as the apologies. The irony of its funding source, the penance of Morgan and Martina, was not lost on anyone. Applications poured in. Young women with audacious dreams facing down sceptical families and societal expectations. It was gratifying. My parents, they became shadows. Their assets, meticulously picked apart by lawyers and federal seizures, were decimated. What little remained after funding the foundation and settling various claims left them in a much smaller, rented property in a town far from the circles they once dominated. I heard through a third party they were existing, socially crippled, financially neutered. Karma, I mused, had a way of delivering its invoices with brutal efficiency. I stood in my new office. It was the former master study of the estate, the very room where father had likely plotted Chase's glorious future and my insignificant one. Now it was refitted to my style, sleek, modern, functional, with a commanding view of the sprawling gardens I now owned. Tegan was with me, a bottle of champagne open between us, the good stuff. "Two unconventional women," she said, raising her glass. "And two meticulously executed plans," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. We were reviewing the first batch of grant applications for the foundation. One caught my eye. A young woman, bright, articulate, wanted to become an investigative journalist. In her personal essay, she cited Lexis Barnes's takedown of the Woods scandal as a primary inspiration, a testament to the power of truth against entrenched interests. A smile touched my lips, a genuine, hard-won smile. It wasn't just about the revenge, the settling of scores. It was about this, building something new, something meaningful, from the ashes of their self-immolation. I hadn't just torn down their world, I'd repurposed the rubble. My phone buzzed on the desk, my actual work phone, the one that signalled the next challenge, the next crisis. I glanced at the caller ID. A new name, a very high-profile name. Someone else whose carefully constructed world was teetering on the brink. Tegan raised an eyebrow. "Duty calls." "Always," I said, picking up the phone. "Sienna speaking." My voice was calm, authoritative, the voice of a woman who knew her worth, who had faced her past and bent it to her will. The chains were broken, not through forgiveness, that was never on the table, but through a justice I had personally designed and delivered. The past was settled, the future and all its messy, lucrative crises was mine to write.